Far out on the edge of a frozen forest village, a single cry pierced the roaring winter storm, a warning of a tragedy unfolding in the dark. A pregnant shepherd named Bear was trapped in stalled labor, fading fast, while a terrified young girl clung to her, powerless to stop the life slipping away. But when a lone forest ranger emerged through the snow, everything changed. In that deadly cold between fear and hope, a fragile alliance formed, human and animal fighting side by side against nature itself. None of them could have imagined that this brutal night would turn into a miracle no one thought possible. Snow pressed against the small forest-side village like a silent, suffocating tide, burying rooftops and erasing the boundaries between sky and earth. Inside a modest wooden cabin perched at the fringe of the tree line, a single lantern guttered weakly, fighting the cold drafts that slipped through every crack. Lily Whitmore, a 12-year-old little girl with pale freckled skin and long chestnut hair usually tied in a loose braid, knelt on the floor beside her German shepherd, Bear. Lily was slight in build, almost fragile in appearance, with soft brown eyes that always carried a hint of melancholy since the loss of her father in a forest accident 3 years prior. His absence shaped her into someone who loved fiercely and feared deeply losing those she cared about, and right now she feared more than she had feared in years. Bear, a 4-year-old sable shepherd with a thick winter coat mottled in black and tan, lay on her side, her belly swollen with late-term pregnancy. Her breaths came in shallow, uneven gasps, each one a tremor beneath Lily's hands. Usually, Bear was spirited, a loyal, intelligent companion who trotted at Lily's heel during long walks and barked joyfully when she played fetch in the meadow. Tonight, though, the proud shepherd's golden eyes were clouded with pain. Her ears lay flat, her once strong legs twitching weakly as another contraction rocked through her exhausted body. "It's okay, sweetheart. I'm right here," Lily whispered, though her voice cracked. She pressed a wool blanket closer around Bear's trembling frame. The blanket belonged to Lily's father, rough woven, dyed a deep forest green, smelling faintly of cedar despite the passing years. She had taken it from the top shelf of the closet when the first signs of Bear's distress appeared. Now it lay draped over the dog like a thin, desperate shield against the cold creeping through the cabin walls. Outside, the wind hurled itself against the shutters, rattling them violently. Snow piled in thick waves against the front door, threatening to trap them inside. The storm had rolled in faster than the weather station predicted, transforming the familiar village into a freezing labyrinth of white. Lily swallowed hard, trying to steady her shaking hands. She pressed her palm against Bear's belly, waiting for the rhythmic movement of puppies shifting within. Nothing. Only the tight spasm of another failed contraction. Bear whimpered, a high, strangled sound Lily had never heard from her before. Fear speared through Lily's chest, cold as the winter pressing against the windows. "Please, Bear, please don't leave me," Lily whispered. Her breath trembled as it left her lips in a faint puff of vapor, the cabin growing colder despite the crackling fire in the hearth. She tugged another blanket from the couch, a faded blue one stitched by her late grandmother, and laid it over Bear's hind legs. The shepherd's fur was damp with sweat, her paws twitching restlessly against the wooden floor. Lily brushed the fur between Bear's ears, her heart aching. She remembered the first day she met Bear, just a clumsy pup bounding out from behind the barn, tail wagging, as though she had chosen Lily in that very moment. It had been the first time Lily smiled, really smiled, after her father's death. Now, the thought of losing Bear felt like losing that fragile piece of healing all over again. A violent gust of wind slammed into the cabin, shaking loose snow from the roof. Bear jolted weakly, her breath stuttering. Lily leaned closer, pulling the dog's head into her lap. "I've got you. I'm not going anywhere." But her voice betrayed her terror. Bear's body felt colder than before. Her nose, usually warm and damp, had turned dry and icy. Her belly muscles tensed again, but the contraction faded with nothing to show for it. Lily knew enough to understand that something was terribly wrong. She wiped her tears with the back of her hand, forcing herself to focus. "Come on, girl, stay with me," she pleaded. Her fingers stroked Bear's side in slow circles, the way the vet had once shown her to help soothe a restless dog. But Bear's tremors grew sharper. Her breaths came further apart. Every labored inhale sounded like it scraped through her chest. Outside, the storm raged on, with snow beating against the window like frantic fingers. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, its sound cutting through the stillness in cruel, evenly spaced beats. Minutes dragged like hours. Lily grabbed another towel, warmed it near the fire, and pressed it gently against Bear's lower belly. "Just one more push," she coaxed softly. "You can do this." But Bear didn't push. She only exhaled a long, trembling breath that made Lily's throat tighten painfully. The shepherd's eyes, once filled with the bright alertness of life, now flickered faintly, as though the world were dimming around her. Lily felt panic creeping up her spine like frost. She bowed her head over Bear's, her tears dripping into the dog's fur. "Don't go," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Not like this, not alone, not in this cold." Bear let out a thin, broken whine. Lily clutched her closer, willing her warmth into the fading body. But the truth pressed in as relentlessly as the storm outside. Bear was slipping away, and Lily, alone in the frozen cabin, could do nothing but hold on tighter. The winter wind screamed across the tree line as if the forest itself were warning travelers to turn back. Snow fell in ruthless sheets, blurring the edges of the world and reducing the familiar paths into white, shifting corridors. Ranger Owen Hart, a 32-year-old forest officer with a broad-shouldered frame built from years of trekking mountain terrain, pressed forward through the storm, his breath forming sharp clouds that vanished instantly into the violent cold. Owen had a rugged, wind-bitten face marked by a thin scar across his left cheek, earned 5 winters ago during a rescue mission when he fought off a panicked buck trapped in barbed wire. His dark beard, trimmed short close to the jaw, was now dusted in crystals of ice. His eyes, a deep storm cloud gray, were calm but alert, eyes of a man who had seen too many emergencies turn into tragedies. He preferred solitude, speaking little unless necessary, shaped by a childhood in a home where silence was more common than warmth. Yet beneath that guarded exterior lived a stubborn sense of duty that drove him through storms like this one. He was on his final patrol of the night when he heard it. A faint, broken howl carried by the wind. Not the cry of a wolf, too weak, too trembling. And beneath it, almost swallowed by the storm, came the sound of a woman sobbing. Owen's eyes narrowed. Without hesitation, he adjusted his wool-lined hat, gripped the strap of his survival pack, and trudged faster through knee-deep snow. Guided by instinct as much as sound, he followed the trail toward the village outskirts, where the cabins stood like lonely islands in a frozen sea. The closer he came, the clearer the noises became. A woman's choked pleas and a dog's faltering whimpers. Owen rounded the side of a snow-drowned cabin and froze for a split second. There, half hidden in the wind's white frenzy, Lily Whitmore knelt beside her shepherd, Bear, her slender body curled desperately over the dog as though she could shield her from death itself. Lily's eyes, usually warm though often shadowed by old grief, were crimson and wide with panic. Her cheeks were streaked with tears that froze as soon as they touched air. Snow clung to her chestnut hair, plastering loose strands to her face. She looked smaller than Owen remembered her from the occasional market encounter, fragile, trembling, but unyielding in the way she held her friend. "Lily!" Owen called out, forcing his voice above the wind. She flinched, her head jerking up. For a heartbeat, fear flashed in her eyes. Fear not of him, but of hearing the wrong news, of losing what she was clutching so tightly. Owen slowly lifted both his gloved hands. "It's just me." "Ranger Hart," he said, stepping carefully toward her. "Let me help." Lily hesitated, Her entire body curled protectively around Bear, but the dog's weak, shuddering breaths made the decision for her. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely a thread. "She's dying." Owen dropped to his knees beside her. Immediately he took in Bear's condition: the rigid abdomen, the fading body heat, the blue-tinged gums, the irregular, trembling breaths. His expression sharpened, jaw clenched with professional urgency. "She's in obstructed labor," he said. "She's losing body heat too fast. We need to stabilize her first." Lily nodded shakily, wiping her tears with a trembling sleeve. "I tried. I used blankets, but she's getting colder." Owen swung his pack off his shoulder. From it, he pulled a compact thermal pad, a military-grade heating sheet designed for wilderness emergencies. He cracked the metal disc inside, activating the chemical reaction. The pad warmed instantly. He pressed it gently against Bear's belly, then wrapped the thick emergency blanket around her midsection. Bear whimpered softly but didn't resist, too weak to do anything but breathe. Owen continued working swiftly, placing his bare hand briefly on the dog's chest to gauge warmth, then checking her pulse with 2 fingers at her throat. His brow furrowed. "Her temperature's dropping fast. If we don't move her soon—" His words were cut off by a deafening crack of thunderless wind. A sudden blast slammed into the cabin wall, rocking the window shutters and sending a spray of icy powder across their faces. Owen grabbed the blanket more tightly around Bear. Lily instinctively bent lower, shielding Bear's head with her hands. The gust didn't ease, it intensified. Snow spiraled upward like white smoke, the storm growing vicious. Owen clicked the button on his radio. "Dispatch, this is Ranger Hart. I need immediate." Static devoured the rest. He turned his body to block the wind, trying again. "Dispatch, emergency veterinary response, code 7. Do you copy?" Nothing but a metallic hiss. Lily's breaths went ragged. "No. Owen, you can fix it, right? Try again. Please, just try again." He tried 3 more times, adjusting the dial, lifting the radio higher, pointing it toward the tree line. "Come on," he muttered through clenched teeth. But the storm swallowed every signal. Finally, he lowered the radio slowly, his jaw tightening as his eyes met Lily's. He didn't need to speak for her to know the truth. They were on their own. The storm howled around them, sealing the cabin from the world outside. Lily's shoulders trembled as reality struck, the realization that Bear's life hung by the thinnest thread, and no rescue team was coming through this blizzard. Owen gently placed a firm hand on her shoulder. "Listen to me," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos surrounding them. "Bear still has a chance, but we have to act now. I'm not leaving either of you." Lily swallowed hard, her eyes flooding again. But this time, when she looked at Owen, she didn't see hopelessness. She saw a lifeline, thin but unbroken. She nodded, clutching Bear's paw tightly. Outside, the storm unleashed another furious roar. Inside, Owen tightened the blanket around Bear, steeling himself for the long, dangerous effort ahead. The storm showed no mercy as Owen secured Bear onto the narrow wooden sled, tightening the leather straps with fingers stiffened by cold. Lily stood beside him, her arms wrapped around her shivering body, her breath forming quick, frightened puffs. Her long, chestnut hair stuck to her damp cheeks, and the exhaustion in her eyes made her look far older than her 24 years. Despite her fear, she crouched near Bear and whispered softly to her, running a trembling hand down the shepherd's sweat-soaked fur. There was no time for hesitation. Owen lifted the sled's front handle, gesturing for Lily to take the side rope. The path toward the forest trail was a blur of white, barely visible beneath the relentless snowfall, but he knew the terrain well enough to navigate even blind. With a grunt, he pulled the sled forward, his boots sinking deep into powder. Lily followed close behind, the rope cutting into her gloves as she fought to keep the sled steady. Bear lay motionless except for the faint, irregular rise of her rib cage. The heating pad beneath her belly radiated only a weak warmth now, fading against the cold that crept in from every direction. The wind whistled through the skeletal branches above, carrying the eerie creak of snow-laden limbs bending dangerously under their weight. Owen's jaw tightened. He had crossed this section of forest hundreds of times, but tonight every sound felt sharper, every shadow more hostile. Snow stung his eyes as he leaned into the pull. Behind him, Lily stumbled but kept pace, driven by a silent terror that urged her forward with every step. "Stay with me, Bear," she whispered, her voice nearly carried away by the storm. "Just a little more." The forest here was thinner, a sparse stretch where dead pines stood like twisted pillars marking the passage into deeper woods. Visibility dropped to nearly nothing, a swirling wall of white, but Owen felt the shift in the air before he heard the sound, a heavy crunch of snow. Not the wind, not the shifting branches, something alive, something big. He froze mid-step, raising a hand for Lily to stop. She stiffened, the rope slipping from her gloves. "Owen," she whispered. Another crunch echoed, closer this time. Owen narrowed his eyes at the line of dark trunks ahead. From behind one of the thicker pines, a shape emerged with slow, deliberate heaviness. A black bear. A large one. Its thick winter coat was matted with frost, and its breath came out in deep plumes of steam. Snow clung to its broad shoulders, giving it the appearance of a moving boulder. This was not a curious wanderer. It was a hungry creature driven from its usual grounds by the storm, searching for anything that resembled an easy meal. And the scent of blood from Bear's difficult labor hung in the air like a beacon. The bear's small dark eyes locked onto the sled. It took another step forward, snow crunching loudly beneath its powerful paws. Lily's breath hitched sharply. Bear, sensing danger through instinct more than strength, lifted her head a few inches. A weak growl vibrated from her throat, more air than sound. She tried to stand, her paws trembling violently under her weight, but her legs collapsed, and she fell heavily into the blankets. "No, Bear," Lily cried softly, dropping to her knees beside the sled. "Don't move." The black bear's ears twitched at the noise. It lowered its head, exhaling a low, rumbling snarl, and took another slow, ground-shaking step forward. Owen's pulse pounded, but his movement stayed controlled. He unhooked a red signal flare from his belt, long, cylindrical, coated with frost, and braced himself. "Lily," he murmured, barely audible. "Stay behind the sled." She swallowed and nodded, pulling the blankets tighter around Bear's body. Owen took one step forward, inserting himself between the animal and the sled. He pulled the flare's ignition cord in one hard motion. A violent hiss erupted as a burst of red flame roared to life, illuminating the snowfall in a fiery glow. The bear recoiled instantly, startled by the sudden blaze. Owen lifted the flare higher, the red light reflecting off the ice crystals in his beard. "Back!" he shouted over the wind, his voice commanding and sharp. He took a bold step toward the bear, thrusting the flare forward. Sparks crackled. The red glow flickered across the bear's face. It blinked rapidly, then swung its head away, letting out a disgruntled bellow. Still, it didn't flee. Not yet. Lily watched with wide eyes, one hand clutching the sled frame as if anchoring herself. The flare sizzled louder, sending another spray of sparks across the snow. The bear took another step backward, then another. Finally, with a heavy grunt, it turned and lumbered off into the darkness between the trees. Snow swallowed its massive form within seconds. Silence rushed back all at once, broken only by Lily's trembling exhale. Owen lowered the flare but didn't extinguish it yet. He scanned the tree line for several long moments, ensuring the animal wouldn't circle back. Only when the night remained still did he turn to Lily. She knelt pressed against Bear's side, her face streaked with melting snow and fear. "Is it gone?" she asked. "Yes," Owen answered, his voice rough but steady. "But we need to move. That thing could return, or something worse could smell the blood." Bear's breaths were shallower now, her eyelids fluttering weakly. Lily touched her muzzle gently. "She's getting colder." Owen tightened his grip on the sled handle. "Then we go. Faster this time." The storm raged around them, swallowing their footprints almost as quickly as they formed, but Owen pressed forward and Lily followed, both driven by one desperate truth. Every minute lost meant Bear slipped closer to death. The storm deepened into a white tempest as Owen tightened his grip on the sled's wooden handle, muscles flexing beneath layers of wool and frost-bitten fabric. The wind whipped against his broad back, forcing him to lean forward with every ounce of strength he had left. Lily, her face pale and streaked with melting snow, braced herself behind the sled, her boots slipping repeatedly on the icy slope as she pushed with trembling determination. Bear lay bundled in blankets, her breath faint and uneven, her once proud sable coat damp with sweat and frost. The heating pad beneath her belly had cooled almost completely, and the dim lantern tied to the sled flickered with each violent gust. Lily's breaths came in short bursts as she struggled to keep up. Her arms ached, her fingers numb despite the double-layered gloves. She risked a glance at Bear's limp body. "Stay with us," she pleaded softly, though the wind nearly stole her words. The slope ahead was steeper than she remembered, a path usually gentle but now transformed into a treacherous incline covered in shifting, powdery snow. Owen dug his boots into the slope, his jaw clenched as he leaned his entire weight into the pull. His face, angular and rugged, marked by nights spent in harsh weather, glowed faintly with sweat beneath the ice clinging to his beard. The past had made him resilient. The memory of losing a hiker years ago because he'd been minutes too late had hardened into a quiet vow never to fail again. That vow burned now, driving him through the storm with relentless resolve. The sled jerked sharply as one runner caught on a buried rock. Lily gasped and dropped to her knees, grabbing the blanket before Bear could slide off. The shepherd whimpered weakly, eyes fluttering open before closing again. "I've got her," Lily said, voice cracking. Owen threw his shoulder against the sled, using his weight to steady it until the runners realigned with the snow. "We keep moving," he said, breath ragged. "The clinic's just over the ridge." Lily nodded, though fear twisted inside her chest. The wind howled harder as though trying to push them back. Snow swirled in chaotic spirals, biting at their skin. They pressed onward, step by step, breath by breath. The ridge seemed impossibly far, each foot gained only through sheer will. The sled skidded sideways more than once, forcing Owen to slam his boot against the edge to correct its direction. Lily's hands went numb as she gripped the blankets tighter each time Bear slid dangerously close to the edge. The dog's breathing grew thinner, barely stirring the air. Her paws twitched slightly, as if dreaming through the pain. "She's slipping," Lily whispered, terror coating every word. "We're almost there," Owen replied, though even he felt the creeping dread gnawing at him. The snow softened suddenly beneath their boots as they reached the final incline. Owen pulled harder, groaning through clenched teeth, while Lily pushed with her entire body, her shoulders shaking. And then, at last, the ridge broke. Below them, through sheets of swirling snow, faint lights glimmered, the Sawtooth Veterinary Clinic. A simple, rectangular building of pale wood, its metal roof glittering under the storm's aggression. Relief hit Lily so hard she nearly sobbed. Together they guided the sled down the slope, careful but fast, letting gravity assist where their strength had faltered. When they reached the clinic's entrance, Lily nearly collapsed beside the sled. Owen banged on the door with a gloved fist. Within seconds, the door swung open, revealing Dr. Nora Ellison. Nora, a woman in her mid-40s with sharp cheekbones, sand-colored hair tied back in a low bun, and intelligent hazel eyes, carried the calm authority of someone who had weathered decades of emergency calls. Her frame was lean and wiry, built from years of lifting struggling animals and hauling equipment through harsh conditions. She wore dark scrubs beneath a thick winter coat still dusted with snow, and even in the dim hallway light, her focus sharpened instantly. "What happened?" she asked, voice firm but compassionate. Owen angled the sled forward. "Obstructed labor. Severe hypothermia. She's fading fast." Nora didn't waste a second. With the strength of someone who'd done this 100 times, she helped them wheel the sled inside, down the narrow hallway, and into the emergency room. Lily followed close, her heart pounding. Under bright surgical lights, Nora and her assistant, Daniel, a quiet young man with sandy hair and round glasses, lifted Bear onto the heated metal table. Daniel was new to the clinic, only 22, soft-spoken and gentle, often nervous but deeply devoted to animals. Tonight, fear flickered in his large brown eyes, but his movements remained steady. "Warm saline IV," Nora instructed, "and prep for emergency C-section. Now." Lily stood at the doorway, fingers digging into her sleeves as she watched the controlled storm of motion. Nora opening sterile packs, Daniel adjusting oxygen flow, metal instruments clinking faintly. The clock on the wall read 11:42 p.m. The next hours blurred into a tense quiet punctuated by the soft hum of machines and Nora's low, precise commands. Lily sat outside the room beside Owen, both of them covered in snow, both too exhausted to speak but too anxious to rest. Beyond the window, the storm continued to rage, hurling ice against the glass like impatient fists. Inside, they listened. Every beep of the monitor, every muffled instruction through the door. Then at last, the faint sound of newborn whimpers broke through. Lily's breath caught. Owen lifted his head. Minutes later, Nora stepped into the hallway, her frost-chilled face softening. "She made it," she said. "All of them did." Lily covered her mouth, tears rushing hot and silent. Owen exhaled deeply, the tension draining from his posture. They returned to the recovery doorway where Bear lay, exhausted but breathing, with 3 tiny pups nestled against her side beneath heat lamps. Lily sank to her knees beside the glass, her trembling hand pressed against it. Bear's ear flicked weakly at the sound of Lily's whisper. Owen stood behind her, quiet and watchful, snow melting from his boots onto the clinic tile. Dawn crept slowly over the snow-laden valley, the world washed in a pale gold that softened the jagged edges of the night before. Inside the quiet recovery room of the clinic, warmth radiated from the overhead heat lamps, casting gentle circles of light on the small family gathered on the padded table. Lily, her eyes swollen from hours of tears and sleeplessness, hovered beside the bed where Bear lay. Her chestnut hair was an untamed curtain around her face, tangled from stress and the storm, but her gaze held a tenderness that no exhaustion could fade. She rested one trembling hand on Bear's shoulder, afraid to breathe too loudly, as though sound alone might shatter the fragile peace that had finally emerged after such a brutal night. Bear's eyes, once clouded with agony, fluttered open with slow recognition. Her pupils focused on Lily, and a low, soft rumble formed in her throat. Not a growl, but a murmur of relief. With great effort, Bear lifted her head the slightest bit and pressed her cool nose against the back of Lily's hand. Lily let out a broken gasp, a sound half sob, half laughter, her shoulders shaking as she bent forward to stroke Bear's ears. "You made it, sweetheart," she whispered, her voice cracking. "You're safe." Beneath the warm glow of the lamps, 3 tiny puppies wriggled clumsily against their mother's belly, small bundles of black and tan fur, their eyes still sealed, their bodies shaped like miniature shadows of Bear. They nuzzled blindly into her, emitting tiny squeaks of contentment as they found warmth and milk. One paw, impossibly small and soft, flexed in the air before settling into the blanket. Owen stood near the doorway, leaning one shoulder against the frame. His coat hung open, revealing the thick flannel shirt beneath, still dusted with dried snow. His face, usually stern and defined by rugged lines, had softened into something almost peaceful. The tension that had carved shadows beneath his eyes throughout the night now eased, replaced by quiet pride. "They're strong," he said softly, his deep voice warmed by relief. "All three of them." Lily looked over her shoulder at him, gratitude swelling inside her. She had always known Owen as the reserved ranger who kept to himself, the man whose sharp gray eyes rarely revealed emotion. But this morning, something in him had shifted. He wasn't just a ranger. He was the man who had refused to leave her side, who had fought the storm, who had stood between them and a hungry bear, who had carried hope when she no longer could. "Thank you," she whispered. The words felt too small for everything he had done. Owen gave a modest shrug, gaze steady on Bear and her pups. "You two did all the hard work," he murmured. Daniel, the young veterinary assistant with sandy hair and tired eyes, stepped inside quietly, holding a small clipboard. He moved with cautious steps, his gentle nature making him careful never to disrupt the serenity of the room. "Vitals look good," he said softly, offering Lily a warm, shy smile. "She'll need rest, but she's stable now." Nora Ellison joined him, her lean frame wrapped in a thick dark cardigan after a long night. Though her hazel eyes carried exhaustion, they also glowed with professional pride. "You brought her just in time," Nora said, her tone calm yet firm. "Another hour, and it could have been a very different morning." Lily swallowed hard, looking down at Bear again. She couldn't imagine waking to that kind of morning. She shouldn't have had to imagine it at all, but they were past that now. The weight of the night began to settle behind them like melting snow. Over the next few days, the clinic became a temporary home for the small family. Lily slept on a cot nearby, wrapped in a spare quilt Daniel had found for her. Owen visited every morning before rounds and again in the evenings, bringing food, usually something simple like thermos soup or bread still warm from the village bakery. In those quiet days, the puppies grew steadier, their bellies round with milk, their tiny sides rising and falling in peaceful rhythm. Bear gained strength, her fur drying into its usual soft sheen, her eyes brightening when Lily spoke. When the storm finally lifted and the roads cleared, Nora declared Bear strong enough to go home. Owen helped load the sled outside the clinic. Not the emergency sled from before, but a sturdier one Daniel had found, lined with new blankets that Nora insisted they take. The morning sun stretched across the snowfields as Lily guided Bear into the sled. Bear moved slowly but surely, her tail giving a faint wag when the puppies were tucked safely beside her. The journey home was calm. No storm, no terror, only the soft crunch of snow beneath their steps and the crisp morning air filling their lungs. At the cabin, Lily opened the door to a warm room lit by the gentle glow of a rekindled hearth. She set the puppies in a basket lined with quilts before helping Bear settle on a thick rug near the fire. When everything was finally quiet, Lily sat beside Bear, their shoulders touching. The shepherd leaned into her, exhaling a peaceful sigh. The puppies slept in a heap of warmth, their tiny paws twitching in dreams only new life could conjure. Outside, morning sunlight stretched in golden bands across the blanketed forest, promising gentler days ahead. Inside, the world was small, warm, and whole again, a fragile, beautiful sanctuary carved from courage, love, and the enduring will to protect life, even in the heart of winter. Sometimes the greatest miracles arrive not in thunder or revelation, but in quiet moments when compassion refuses to surrender. Bear's survival, the strength of her newborn pups, and the courage of those who fought for her remind us that the world still holds traces of grace, signs of a God who watches over even the smallest of his creations. In our daily lives, we often rush past those subtle blessings. A helping hand, an unexpected kindness, a second chance we didn't think we would receive. Yet every one of them is a reminder that we are never alone, even in our coldest winters. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs hope, leave a comment so we know you're here with us, and subscribe to follow more true stories of faith, compassion, and resilience. May God bless you and your loved ones, today and always.